So the purpose of this lesson, data import lesson 9, is to examine how data can be imported into Excel from a range of sources. In this case, on the sample sheet which I've sent through, there are 3 embedded files. One is a text file, one is an Excel file, and the other is a database. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through an example and show you some options and things you can do with Excel. The principles will be the same across the board for all the different methods, but I'll point out where there's particular differences. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at importing a CSV or text file. We're going to look at connecting to a database or connecting to an Excel file. And when we use that term connecting, what we're really doing is creating a window into a file or a database and enabling a refresh function, which means your data is as up to date as it can be. Again, I'll show you those features as we get to them. So, importing data. Excel is a powerful tool that is capable of taking raw material, raw data, manipulating it, and then presenting it to get meaningful information in order to inform decisions or to demonstrate trends. The big question has to be, how does Excel get the data in order to be able to do this creative work? Well, imagine having to type in hundreds and thousands of rows of data with the likelihood of error and the cost of time to the business. So it's clearly not very practical for large amounts of information and data. Clearly it is better if we can just get a download from the database or application, often in the form of a report, and then import it into Excel. Better still if we can create a live link to the source of the data and merely refresh it so that it is bang up to date. This in turn can go directly to a pivot table or graphics. The time savings if you do that are quite significant. So the good news is we can do this, and what is more, we can tailor the connection to discard unwanted bits of information and data, and also we can tidy up errors. So I'll show you when I start to go into the example of how we can filter, how we can change things, and really get down to just the bits of information that we're interested in, and then of course how we can tidy it up as well. So if you just think about this, if there's an application, then there will be a data set that sits behind this, and therefore that can be mined for information. So you can think of almost anything from Facebook having a data set behind it. You can think of personnel accounting applications. You can think of stock databases and applications. Just about anything, any program that runs will have some kind of data set associated with it. So in terms of a demonstration, I'm going to show 3 methods of importing data to Excel along with some key features. In the first instance, we're very often sent a data dump. So somebody gives us a file, which can be quite a large file, and then we have to try and sort of use that and bring it into the program. It's not particularly helpful, that's because we may not wish to see all of the data, so it becomes quite unwieldy, and usually we have to take it all in as one, so we have to get the whole lot into our sheet before we can start playing with it. So we're going to do this now, and what I'm going to do is there's 2 ways of doing this, and first way, you can go to File and then Open, and then if you browse, you will see you'll be given the text file, and you can put it somewhere on the computer that you can access. So mine is in a folder called Excel Lessons. Then what I want to do here is I want to specify text files. There we go, text files, and then it'll give you examples. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just showing you where it is. This is one method of doing that. So if you open this up, it will open the file into Excel. However, there's a better way of doing this. So if you come back out of that and you go into data here in the middle, you then go see this option here. So get and transform data is the kind of group of options. So here we've got from text a CSV. So if we click on that one, wait till it opens. So there we see the same view we saw before. So we're going to go into this first one here, and we're going to click on import. Don't need to change anything else, just need to highlight the file and click on import. It's now going to have a look at that file and analyze it. and it's still working on that. So what it's doing now is it's establishing a connection to that particular file. So if that file changes at any point, then this connection, when it's refreshed, will make sure the data is up to date. Most times you would just open the file and drop it in. So the window you can see now is giving you a number of options. So we can look at, don't worry too much about the first thing, it's just I suppose a technical aspect of the file. But the delimiter here, so what we're saying is comma. Now I know this because I saved the file earlier, but there's a comma between each field of information here. So what it's doing is it's splitting the data, it's showing what it will look like. If you choose, for example, custom, it will do an evaluation and it will show you a different view. So you can go in and adjust that. So you might know it's split by semicolon or space or tab, or you can set a fixed width if you wish to do that. But in this case, we know it's a comma that's separating out, so I'm going to leave it like that. So a couple of other options while we're waiting for that to come back. Here at the bottom right hand corner you can see an option load with a little drop down arrow, and you can see transform data and then cancel if you don't want to carry on. If you click transform data, all that will do is it will move the columns into rows. So in other words, you might have an instance where you prefer to see the data, instead of being presented as it is now in columns, you want to see them in rows. I rarely use that, but you might want to try that if it suits your purpose. The more important thing here though is load. Now what we're going to seek to do, you've got two options. You can click on the load, which I do not recommend you do, because potentially you might be accessing a file or a database which has got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of information, and it will basically overwhelm your computer. It'll be very slow, very cumbersome. So you don't necessarily want to do that first. You want to go down to load to option, and another window will open. Just have to wait for that to turn up. You have to get used to the idea that sometimes your computer will be slow when it does some of these things, especially when there's large amounts of data. In this case there's 35,000 rows of information, which is not particularly large, but it's big enough. We'll see what happens when this comes through. So here we've now got a view which says import data. So you've got a number of options: table, pivot table report, pivot chart, only create a connection, whether you want it into the existing worksheet, so in this sheet 1 here, or whether you want to have it in a new worksheet, so it'll create another tab, and then if you want to add it to a data model, which is something we can cover at a different stage. So if you go for table, it will load 35,000 rows of information, it will load all of the columns, it will drop everything in there. If you go to pivot table, it will automatically open up the option to create a pivot table, and you can start to build that. If you go to pivot chart, it will do more or less the same thing, but it will also open a chart view as well. We can show you that in a second, just to show you what it looks like. But what I strongly recommend is you only create the connection, and what that will do effectively is create a window for you to look into the file in this case, or the database in the other examples. So you aren't actually downloading any data, your file size isn't large, it's not cumbersome. You're simply saying, let's open a window, let's have a look inside and see what we can see, and then we can start to play with it. So you'll see a pane opens on the right side, and you have this thing. Now this is referred to as a query. If you hover over it, it'll give you a few bits of information. They haven't downloaded column headers, which is not particularly helpful, but we can sort that out. And as it says here, it's only connection for the time being. So if I right click on this, it gives me a number of options down the side. So we'll go into some of the other aspects shortly, but what we're going to look at now is edit as an option, and this will open another screen. So in the edit mode, you can now see a sample of the data. So this is what we have coming through from the sheet. In this case, they've got column numbers. Normally, it will bring down the headers. There was probably a button I didn't spot earlier on where I could have selected the headers. So I could go back, click that button, and have the relevant information. But let's not worry about it too much for now. So you'll see there's filter arrows down here, which give you a number of choices, and depending upon the number of possibilities in there, depends on how big that is. You then see another little pane here with applied steps. So this shows every change that you make. It's important when you look at this and make some changes, which we'll start doing in a second, it will start to record them here, and they'll be recorded in a particular order. And if you want to go in and amend and adjust things at a later point, you need to bear in mind that something you change in here might have an impact further down the applied steps. Now that'll just become apparent because there'll just be an error, and you'll have to unwind that and try and find out how to resolve that error. We can cross that bridge if we need to. So what we're going to do next, we are going to go and look into choose columns. So now I know that I don't particularly want all of this information here. Now unfortunately this is going to be a little bit unhelpful because whereas I had headings before, I don't necessarily have headings now. So the things I want to get rid of is 10, 11, 12 and up to 14. Yeah, so I want to get rid of columns 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Now I can right click on them and remove. That would be easy to do. But what I want to do is I want to go choose columns, and there's two options. You can either go directly to a particular column, so you have to specify it, or you go to choose. Now you can search. So if you have a database which has got hundreds of different fields, hundreds of different columns, you can say, okay, I know the column I need to go for is staff number, so you type staff number in and then you go to that particular column. So as I say, it's a bit unhelpful this because I did have headers before, but we know that we want to get rid of column 10 to 14. So all you do is you untick those columns, and then once you click OK, they disappear from the view. So the reason I've done that is because I know the first column is staff number, country, city, department, grade, yearly salary, pension, overheads, etc. So just a bunch of figures there, and then we've got the address. So it's a way of cleaning up your data before you begin to draw it in. So you can choose the columns and get rid of the things that you don't want. So again, if you look to the right hand side, you'll see there is removed columns here. If I right click on this and then click edit, it will show you what's been selected or deselected. So if I want to change that, I can go in here and I can add it back again, or I can take another column out. So let's just cancel out of that. You can also rename this if you want to. So if you want to give it something that means something more to you than just simply remove columns, then you can say, remove redundant columns, or whatever you want to call it. Entirely up to you. So what we want to do next is we want to filter out some of the options. Now what we're going to do now is this is reducing the data to only that bit that we're interested in. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this drop down arrow here, and you'll notice a couple of things here. First of all, it starts to list some of the options, but it does give you an idea that the list might not be complete. So if you press load more, it will then load, in some cases it will load all of the options you've got, so it'll give you the full list. Where there are too many values, it won't necessarily list everything. So a better way of doing it might be to go into text filter and say we are only interested, in this case we're only interested in Germany, so I'm going to go equals, it'll pop up with a box, and I'm going to type in Germany. Something to be aware of, if your data contains spelling errors, so let's say somebody incorrectly spelled Germany once or twice in the data, then you won't catch it. You won't pick it up in that view. There are ways to check data, but we can do that at a later stage. So I can go and select more, so I can say, okay, if it equals Germany or if it equals UK, and then it will keep them. So if I click OK now, you'll notice the data will change, and now it's only listing entries from Germany. So I've already narrowed my data. I'm already reducing the amount of information that's going to come through, and therefore the size of the file that I'm going to end up with once I decide to load the data. So I want to save it for now. So when you do finish on this view, you see the cross arrow at the top to close that view. You can either go close and load, or you can just close it out. So we're just going to close it out for now, and then you'll be given a choice. So you can either keep the changes, these changes you've got here in the applied steps, or you can discard them. So if you've been playing around with it and it's not working, you can go back to where you were before by simply discarding the changes. So in this case, we're going to keep them. So nothing's happened in terms of a visible change on the screen, but the connection here has saved all of those choices, options, etc. that you've set up. So the next thing to do is to actually load the data. So if I right click on this, and there is an option down here called load to, very much the same as the first one. So if I click on that, and again it gives you options here. So what I'll do is I will load it to a table first, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we load to pivot and load to chart, etc. So by selecting table, I'm going to put it in a new worksheet because I want it to be nice and tidy. You've got to be careful where the cursor is, because your table will start wherever the cursor happens to be on the chart, or wherever it says in this particular location box. So I'm going to go OK. Let's load that. So now it's looking into that file, and it's starting to pull out everything that's Germany, and it's also dismissing those columns that we chose not to select. Now, other things you can do, I didn't cover it at the time, but you can rename these columns if you want to. So if I go back in just for a second and click Edit, and it will come up. So here I'm going to rename that column. If I find the correct, there we go. And I'm going to call it staff number. And enter. And then if I close that, and again keep the changes, every time you do this it will reload, and there you go, staff numbers appeared at the top. So you can do that across the board if like in this case you haven't ticked the headers box. So not to worry too much about that, because we know what we're looking at anyway. So you can then start to do things with this data, either if you go into insert and you can run pivots from here, you can do charts from here, you can start to check the data, you can change the formats. You can change the format in the previous version before you load it, but either way you can do that, or you can create conditional formats, etc. So you can do all the normal stuff you can do in Excel. Now what are we going to do next? Well, we've loaded the table, we've made you aware of the cursor, so I want to go back to the query again and right click to edit, and what I want to do now is I want to add a column. So you can add a column based on conditions. So if you click up here, you've got an option at the top called add column. Now you've got a number of different things, but we're going to create something called a conditional column. That will open up another window. Let's give it a moment. So what do I want to do? You might have a number of different things that you might want to, criteria that you might want to check for or set. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I want to set a threshold of £50,000 as an annual or yearly salary, and I want to know if anybody has gone above that level. So all I need to do, I'll give it a name. I'm just going to call it threshold in here, and then you need to know which column you're referring to. So now I happen to know that it's column 6 because that's the annual salary. So if I click on column 6, obviously if you knew the name you just pull down the name. You want to know if it's greater than. So it literally will be greater than. So it won't be 50,000, it'll be 50,001 or 50,000.1 or whatever. So just be aware of little things like that. But let's just put 50,000 in. Now what do I want to do if it's greater than? So I want to say, okay, breached. Oops, help if I could spell it properly. So I want to say breached. Now that's if it's above £50,000. So what if it's not above 50,000? So what we're saying here is, if it doesn't meet that criteria, then just say, in this case, no. Now you can add other rules, so you can set a lower limit, you can set other things depending upon what you want to do, but this is all we're going to set for now. So what this will do is this will create another column, and it will then indicate if there is anyone in there with a salary above 50,000. So if I click OK, and there you go. So already you can see in this particular sample view, we've already got quite a number which have breached the condition that we set. So again, in the right hand pane here, you've got the criteria here. Again, you could go in and you could change the criteria if you wanted to, make it higher, make it lower. It's up to you. Now if I close out of that again, it will give you the option to keep it, which of course I'm going to do. And when I do that, it will refresh and it will add a column. There you go. And now of course you can filter. So you can say, okay, who's breached? And there we've got a number. And if you look to the bottom right, it's actually counting all of them. 5,004 staff in this case are above that threshold. So again, very much depends what you want to do, but that's a demonstration of creating a conditional column based on the information that's already there. And as you can imagine, you can do quite a few different things with that. So let me just have a quick pause for breath. So the last thing I'll show you for the time being before moving on to the other section, if you go onto the query again here and you right click and drop down to properties. Now there's a number of ways you can refresh data. You can either click on refresh, in which case it'll literally refresh now, so any changes that get made in the source file will be pulled through here. So that's one way of doing it. If you go down to properties, you'll see that we can choose a number of options here. Refresh every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you want to do, and then it will do that every time you set. Now obviously the problem with that is you'll be working with information. You won't necessarily want to do that because you won't want to be disrupted, or more importantly, if it's a large data set, you don't want to have the computer slowing right down every time it's doing that refresh. So don't necessarily choose that option. The other one that's quite handy, refresh data when opening the file. So that's quite useful. So when you open it, the data will refresh. It may take a while, so maybe an opportunity to get a cup of coffee, but that means it will be done, it'll be accurate, and you won't have to worry about it. You won't have to remember to refresh it before that. So that's just a couple of options there. Don't worry too much about the rest of the stuff. It's a bit technical, and probably you don't need to worry about it in any event. It's just the refresh options there. So I'll cancel out of that. So moving on to an Excel file or a database. So it's pretty much the same principles as what we've just demonstrated, except you're basically looking into a different source. So if I go back up to data and then I say, okay, get data from a file. So in this case, we're going to say an Excel workbook. It gives you a few different options. It even gives you the CSV file here and a few others. So if I go to workbook, it's going to go to the same area. Now I want to look into Alex data sample. So if I click on import now, it will open up pretty much the same view as you saw before. So here we go. Now there's a big difference here. This is now showing every single worksheet that is in that file. So obviously you need to know which one you're going to go for. Now these ones here are a bit different. they are named areas. So you might remember in a previous lesson that you can name a cell, you can name a row, you can name a group of cells, a range, a table, etc. And that's what they are. So you can actually refer to those particular things. We're not interested in that. We're interested in this one here called working data, which is basically the same information as we can see on the screen that we were working with before. So here you can see this is the same fields. It's now got the headers here as well, and it's got all the relevant information. And again, it's just a window at the moment. And again, you have the same option to transform the data and to load and to cancel. So what we're going to do is do the same thing as we did before. We're going to go load to, and then again given the same options. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say okay, we're still going to load to a connection because I want to show you a couple of other things. And then you can see here we've now got two queries, one of which is effectively loading information and we'll refresh, and the other one is just a connection for the time being. So if we go edit, and what you will see is what's in the Excel sheet. Now, in a lot of cases, you will find all sorts of different things in Excel sheets. So you might find that someone started this this header row here further down, so you might find gaps and so forth. So you might want to get rid of some rows. So for example, if you do a drop down here, you'll see that you can remove the top rows. So if your data started, let's say for argument's sake, your data started on row 10, then you could say, okay, get rid of 9 rows of data. And what it will do is it will just get rid of them. So if there are vacant or just junk in those particular rows, it will get rid of it. So you can do that. We're going to cancel it because all of our data is nice and neat. The other option you can do once you've got rid of unnecessary rows is you can use the first row as headers. So often the headers here, let's say those have already started again on row 9, you would want to make sure you use the top row as your headers in this case. And that is all I'm going to show you on that one. We don't need to do anything else with this because well, what we can do is we can quickly run through, let's see, choose columns. This is what should have been in the other one. So here we've got random, that's just me generating the information, so we'll take those out. We won't create the conditional file, so we've got the remaining headers there, and actually number doesn't need to be in there either, so we'll take that out as well. Number is out. Okay, so if I close that and close that, it will say, do you want to keep it? Yeah, we do. So it's still only a connection. So what I'm going to do, rather than load to a table, I'm going to load to a pivot chart, because essentially a pivot table will be there as well, but this will show you what it can do. Now I'm going to put it in a new worksheet as well, just got to be wary of that little option there. So when I do this now, it's still looking, in this case it's going to look at all 35,000 rows of data. So if I click OK, it's going to open up a view for me, and you can see it's loading all of the rows of data here. Now what we've got is we've got a standard pivot table view, we've got the field lists here on the right hand side, and then we've got a chart window, if you like. So if I now go, okay, we're looking at countries, we're looking at staff number, and there you go. So all it's done is it's given you a quick chart very quickly as to the number of staff and which country they're in. Again, you can play with that to your heart's content. Now if I go back to this query here and I go edit, and then I come back to the filters when it comes up, and I'm only going to be interested in Germany because I really like Germany, so I'm going to pick that. It'll be up in a sec. There we go. If I click OK, then now it's added another step. If I close and keep, and as before it will then recalculate this, and it will only pull through. In this case we know it's going to be 7043 because it's the same information, just a different source. There you go. Now what it's also done, as you can see, it said okay, there's no other countries there, there's only this one, that's all you're going to get in your chart. So you can see how versatile it is and how quick it is to be able to get information from a source into a presentation. And what's more, you can copy this as a link into a PowerPoint, and then you would just update straight to your PowerPoint presentation. So you can imagine the efficiency and time savings you can get from that once you've got it all set up and the way you want it done. Again, here for example, because we've only got one country, we might turn around and say let's find out how the city breakdown is, and there we go, we can change that. So very versatile, very clever. Now what I'm also going to show you as well, it's not particularly different. So if I go back to data and I go get data, I now want to get it from a database itself. Now SQL is quite common as a database. In this case I'm going to use Access because I have Access on the program and I have an Access database, but generally speaking you'll find a number of different options there. So if I click on Access, now it's going to go to the two files that I have, and if I go import now, it will show me the same window again. Just wait for it to load. It's always helpful to have a cup of tea close by as well, just for these things. So there we go, it's starting to look. Now normally in my experience, when you go to this option, then you find that this thing called working data, it's a report in this case. So you know, before we had a worksheet or a table, in this case it's a report. So if I was to go into my database and create particular reports for particular purposes, then it will have those listed there, and I will be able to go into each of those different reports to only select those particular things. So there might be, say, you might have 100 fields in a database, you might only have 5 in one report, another 5 in another report, etc, etc. So this will normally give you a menu, if you like, of options. Now there is only one in this case because I created it earlier on, and I know it's the same as the other information because I know where it's all come from, but it's just showing you that's the choices you've got. So it's based on reports in the case of databases. And again, you can pick and choose. It's starting to look into the database for the time being. It's taking a little bit of time to do that, but effectively you'll have the same option. So here we go, same sort of information, load to, exactly the same as before, and then it will pop up as a query once I do in connection. So there you go, same thing again. Now something that's useful to do is if you want to copy a query, so if I right click on here, I can copy the whole thing and I can paste, and that is exactly the same, and it will load as well. But if I wanted to say that's Germany, if I wanted to call this one here, bear with me, just come out of that. If I want to call this one here Germany, and let's say that I want to call this one Poland, if I right click and I go edit, so I'm not going to build the table just yet, but what I'm going to do is go in and change this. So here I know that it's filtered rows, so if I edit, what I can do is when it opens up, I can just simply pick Poland. Now I didn't have to type it in, I could have used the drop down arrow, but you can type it in as well, and that will then change this view, so it's only selecting Poland. If I click close, close and keep, it will then reload this data with the Polish data. And it's saying there's 7,004 employees in Poland. Now again, I can now go back to the pivot table and show the fields. Let me just do that. Field list here. And I can do the same thing, so I can say country, because we know there's only one country. I can do city, several cities. There's a spelling mistake in there, so that's one thing. So I need to go back into the database and correct that. So that's not intentional, I have to say, but there are other errors that have been deliberately put in. So staff number here, and again you can see the breakdown in numbers. So you can create as many as you want. You could, again, what we have here, must be emphasised, is there's 3 different sources of information. So the first one is from a text file, which is not particularly helpful because you'll have to update that text file. So you'll have to get another data dump from someone else, another contact, to be able to reconnect to that file. So that's not very helpful at all. The database is probably quite useful because you just go straight to the database and that's just updated as and when, and you don't have to worry about it being up to date, because it just is. It's what it is. It's a snapshot at the time. The Excel sheet, again, an Excel sheet will have to be updated in due course, so it's not the most reliable. So if you have a chance and you know where the information is, although they're 3 things the same, if somebody gives you an Excel or somebody gives you a text file, then great, thanks very much, we can set that up. But it's much more preferable to be given direct access to the database. Obviously, in a big organisation where there's data protection in issue, then it may be that you're not given access to that, or you may have to get special permission to do that. So what you'll find is the problems you might have would be you don't have access permission to certain files and folders, therefore that could cause a problem. So all depends on your work situation and how that comes together. So that's everything. In this case, it's quite a lot of information. It's quite technical, I suppose, in terms of what it's trying to do, but you can see the benefits and advantages and the speed which you can get information and change things. And that's not actually analysing to any great extent. That's just the practical aspect of getting the information from one place to the next. Thank you very much.